Hi, this is Angela with the Leadership Coach Group, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you today one of our coaches, Jerry Anathan. Jerry, thank you for taking time to meet with me today, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell me a little bit about your coaching style?
Sure, that's a great question. So I've been coaching for about a decade, and I would say I'm more of sort of an organic coach. In other words, I'm not formulaic. I don't have a particular system. I have a ton of tools and a ton of ways of approaching different challenges or goals, but I am not going to assume what's going on with my client at that minute before we get onto our session. So I want to make sure I'm addressing what's happening for them. The most important thing to me is that my client feels centered and happy and fulfilled. We all have different meanings for that, but that's really important to me, that a client feels safe in the world, in their job, in their relationships, and can actually put their head down at night and have a lot of gratitude for the day. So that being said, I'm going to work with those challenges that are keeping my client from feeling that way, or try to fill the gap, as you might say, in other words. And there are a lot of ways to do that. I would say I bring some humor to coaching as well. I'm kind of a life's too short kind of person. So again, just keeping it something that brings out enthusiasm from my client to actually have these conversations so that they can feel really good moving forward.
Can you tell me more about some of those tools and techniques that you mentioned that you use?
Yeah, I've studied so many different coaching methodologies. One of my favorites, it really comes from the hierarchy of needs, and then that was adapted by Tony Robbins, of all things. And then I've sort of adapted one of his exercises where we look at the 6 human needs by asking a number of questions. And there are 6 different needs. Some of those needs can pull from each other. For example, feeling safe and secure kind of battles with that part of us that wants to have adventure and uncertainty. So it's this certainty versus uncertainty, and many people are going to sway one way or the other more dominantly. But we work with those deficiencies to fill the gap, to keep people saying, how can I approach this challenge and have all my needs met? Because we can, if we use our brains, we can create a way that even the most difficult challenges can be approached with a positive mindset or way of looking at it as we go into it. And I would say it's confidence and feeling like they're invited to the room rather than just a part of a machine, So with my female leader clients, I want them to really feel like they deserve and want to be there to be decision makers and execute on ideas. I think that the dynamics, conversations, and communication within teams can be very difficult for some people. And so I try to help people with conversational models to bring up difficult conversations or just bring up things that have been stewing in them for a long time. I think, direct communication is super important, and it's scary for a lot of people. So I really work with them on those types of things.
I know you mentioned working with a lot of women leaders.
Yes.
As you're thinking of your ideal client, if you could say what your ideal client is, how would you describe them?
I would say it's a woman who's already, typically I would say 99% of the clients that I work with, or 95, are women. So I would say a female leader or a high potential leader. In other words, someone who's rising up in an organization and kind of has not really had that kind of mentorship or that kind of personal growth experience yet. Maybe they've been thrown into a position, or they were highly educated, but not necessarily on, executive presence. How do you show up? How are people perceiving you? How can you be better appreciated for the strengths that you have? We often have women, all and men, have blind spots, so I want to help point out where they're deficient and where they're really, really strong, and kind of move those deficiencies up a bit, but also always focusing on the strengths.
I love that, being able to help them to grow their strengths.
Right.
What was it in your personal life that motivated you to become a coach and made you have a desire to work with people?
Yeah, I've always, since I was very young, I was highly interested in psychology, and sort of went down a different path. I studied economics in college and went into business. And I really missed that connection, sort of that spiritual or soulful part of my work, which is just connecting with people and people, things, and atmospheres, and feeling good about them. When I was in business, I often was in a really high stress environment and didn't have a coach and didn't have, I guess, the education or the understanding that I have now. So it was interesting. A friend of mine was going through coaching and had a coach, and I was just fascinated by some of the work they were doing. So it was like I can remember that precise moment of looking at some of these worksheets and saying, that is what I want to do. Because it takes psychology, motivation, human connection, neuroscience. It takes all of these and puts them together. And it's just it's like the perfect vehicle for me to give back to the world. And so that was the day that I changed my life and enrolled in a couple of courses, and then eventually went to NYU for my coaching degree and Center for Executive Coaching. And now I'm doing some stuff at Harvard.
I love how much you have put into just studying different coaching methods and comparing. I can tell you're very passionate about it. But speaking back of your business experience, what's a few highlights from that time that you think helped to shape and form you to get you to the point to be ready for being a better coach?
One thing is, when I was younger, I wasn't that young, but young enough, and I was in an organization and I felt very psychologically unsafe. So I work a lot in something called psychological safety. And I did not have any safety or feelings of confidence. I was very nervous all the time. I was really stressed out. And had I known about coaching or been able to identify that I was in a toxic environment, I would have been able to do something different, but I didn't know at the time. So I get very passionate about working with others who are in similar situations to that. I think another occasion would be, I then went into running businesses, mostly real estate and development businesses. And I had a yoga studio. Managing people and connecting with them is huge. And those personal relationships that you form as a leader with your reports and your colleagues are priceless relationships, and they need to be really cultivated and treated with respect and growth. And so that, for me, I saw how much it had an impact when I connected with the people that were working with me. And, of course, through coaching, learning a lot about how important those relationships really are on many levels. So I think that also gave me the impetus to further my coaching and for me to really understand how important that is. Nobody wants to feel left behind. We have a lot of introverts in the world, and even though they don't speak up, they're certainly sensitive also, and they want to be included in decision making or feedback and things like that.
That is such an important role as the leader, is to be able to make everyone feel included. I love that you focus on helping others to do that more so.
Yeah, thank you.
And you mentioned going to NYU. Do you live in New York, or?
I live in New York. Great question. I live in New York half time, and the other half of the time I live up on Cape Cod in Massachusetts in Provincetown, which is where I am now. And so it's like a very the best of both worlds. It's very quiet and serene here in the off season on the Cape, but New York, of course, is always a hustle and bustle, and I love both those things.
It's awesome you have access to both. And have you always lived in that area, or have you lived in other parts of the world?
I've mostly lived on the East Coast, Boston, Washington, D.C. I went to college in Boulder, Colorado, and I've traveled quite a bit. I did some coaching in Thailand and Burma. I was in which is now Myanmar, worked with refugees in 4 different refugee camps and did some work in Bangkok. So that was amazing. If I ever moved abroad, it would definitely be to Thailand. Just such a beautiful country and great people, great massages and food too.
Awesome. I love getting to hear some about your experiences. So I've learned a little bit about you as a coach and your background. Tell me something else that you are passionate about and you really enjoy.
I would say I have found that I really need and thrive on my alone time. So that could be a 5-minute walk. I'm fortunate enough to be able to cross the street and be on a beach here. So it's, 5 minutes just walking. And if I can't get that, I find that I'm not able to give as much as I can give when I take that time for myself. So meditation, there's something called positive intelligence where, several times a day we just stop and we do what's called a PQ rep, which might just be taking some breaths or feeling our feet on the floor. I teach a course in that, and so that's also something that I always fall back on and love. Just love those little. It's just a reminder that we can change our state at any time. You just stop, take some time for yourself, and then back at it.
I absolutely loved getting to take your course on the positive intelligence.
So glad, yeah.
And that is something I would highly recommend. I got so much from that myself. So I'm so glad that you do teach that and for everything that you do to help others. It was great spending time with you today. Thank you so much.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me.